Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Ben, this is Books with Bengus Khan, and I'm coming to you with my top 10 books of 2025. I want to wish everyone a very happy new year. I hope you're getting some wonderful recharging time in, and that you've also had a great year in reading or can look ahead to a bunch of great reads next year. And it was an interesting reading year for me. I did a lot of rereading, didn't test the waters with too many new authors, and a couple that I did try, and especially in more recent modern fantasy, are not really working for me that well, but continuing some series worked out great, and some favorite authors, and there are a few new to me authors in this top 10 that I'm really happy to gush about. So let's first start with some honorable mentions. So I had read the first half or so of the Vorkosigan Saga novels by Lois Master Bujold last year, and then I continued on through the second half this year, and man, this second half of this series is just incredible. It delivered everything I was hoping it could, and way, way more. And so books like Komar, Captain War Patrol's Alliance, with a new, very fun POV, Diplomatic Immunity, Cryo Burn, Gentleman Joel and the Red Queen as a very cathartic coda that brought things full circle. Man, all of these books, easy 5 stars. I had a wonderful time with them. The back half of that series, just so good. A couple other reads I want to shout out that I couldn't quite squeeze into my top 10, and those would be Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke, which was a very thought-provoking and propulsive classic sci-fi first contact story. And then we had The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. This new release just really worked for me. I loved Joe leaning into the humor. He just, man, that biting satire and sarcasm that he has was just on full display, and I was having a wonderful time with it. And Stephen Pacey's narration, a new Stephen Pacey Abercrombie audiobook, man, that is like catnip for me. Man, I was just so happy with that. It wasn't the perfect book. It maybe got a little bit long in the tooth for me. If it was a little bit tighter, it would have maybe been even better for me. But I loved it, and can't wait for that continuation next year, maybe. So those are my honorable mentions, and we are coming to the top 10. And at number 10, drumroll please, we have Shadows Upon Time by Christopher Ruocchio. This was one of my most anticipated releases I've ever had, because I haven't, since I've gotten back into fantasy and science fiction about 8 years ago, I haven't started too many series that are ongoing that have completed and come to an end. And so this was a big deal for me, and it delivered. I flew through this one in no time, just glued to the page, and for a big chunker that's about 1,000 pages in hardcover, that's what I'm hoping for, that I just can't put it down. And so in the end, it was a very satisfying finale. There were, man, a lot of sequences that I loved, and I had a really deep dive spoiler chat with my buddy Nikhil on my channel. You can check out a previous video where we go into all the details and specifics, but I love the multi-POV first act we get of retelling the events that happened right after the end of Disquiet Gods. Love some of the mind-bending action sequences in the middle. Some of Hadrian's interactions with a really favorite side character of mine were just a highlight. Yeah, it wasn't the most emotional read, and I loved all these books on the top 10, so I'm going by my emotional reaction maybe as for how I'm splitting hairs and where I'm placing these. And there might be some of the theological theming that took center stage in Disquiet Gods and Shadows Upon Time that I didn't fully connect with. That's maybe holding this end of the series back a little bit for me, and not reaching the emotional highs of Kingdoms of Death, or just the electrifyingly engaging read that was Demon in White for me. And so it's not my favorite of the series, but it's up there, maybe my third, fourth favorite. So a satisfying conclusion to a beloved series, and I really think Ruocchio stuck the landing for me. So very excited to see what Ruocchio comes up with next with his Mediterranean fantasy series. At number 9, and we're going from a giant chunker to a really slim standalone novel, and that is Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. This was a book I'd been hearing about for many, many years in my life, and it delivered an emotional gut punch to me, well, time and time again, but especially at the end. This is a story of a main character telling everything through written journal entries, and this main character has a very serious intellectual disability at the start and undergoes some experimental brain surgery, and then their intellect and IQ and processing is just goes up exponentially and very rapidly. And this story of what it's like to go through that and to be able to then reflect back on his previous life, where he was this janitor in a bakery and was very happy. It was so poignant. Not everything here hit for me. Some things were a little dated, like the treatment of one of the main female characters, but the core aspect of this story just hit so hard. And where it went, I was in great suspense with how it was all going to play out and how it ended. Ended beautifully. So highly recommend this classic. And yeah, you can't go wrong. At number 8 is the latest read I've completed from who I'd say is my favorite author now. And this was Children of Earth and Sky by Guy Gavriel Kay. This is a book of his that I don't see too much love for in the fantasy world, and I thought it was a quietly riveting masterpiece. Just chapter after chapter, scene after scene, these could be short stories that stand on their own, that are so, you go on an elegantly constructed journey in most of these chapters, and they all end in a very poignant way, and just keep the overarching story moving. But the character writing here was so rich, and we have an interesting kind of setup of this is kind of Renaissance Mediterranean setting, where we're spending some time in the Guy Gavriel Kay's version of Venice to start, and we're going on a trading ship, and we follow what's basically like people from different city-states in Croatia, and the head of a trading family, and some other characters who intersect with all of this, and the fantasy elements that he injects just add so much. And it's in this shared universe of books, the major fantasy element is mostly just around how people who die, their spirits can often linger on and communicate with characters who are still alive, and sometimes just they're after a death scene, and we see the spirit of the character kind of looking down at the scene of their death and having some really poignant reflections, and but occasionally they linger on longer and can continue to speak with some characters, and the way that gets played with here just added so much to the whole situations. And just another stunner from GGK, and I think I connect with his more recent Renaissance trilogy of books much more than most readers. But these, honestly, if you look at the ratings, they don't have that many ratings, and he started this in, I think, it's published around 2015 or sometime in there, and with Children of Earth and Sky, and then followed up with The Brightness Long Ago and All the Seas of the World. Man, these 3 books, I think Guy Gavriel Kay is just in his writing prime with these books, and delivering masterpiece after masterpiece. I connect with these books, I think, more than even earlier ones that I loved, like the Sarantine Mosaic or Lions of Alverson. Man, just if you have not read these and you're thinking about doing some Guy Gavriel Kay, and try Brightness Long Ago, you could start with this one as well. They're loosely related, and they're just stunning. Bunch of new modern fantasy authors that I've tried this year didn't really work for me, but man, was that trend just completely bucked with this author. And at number 7, we have Senlin Ascends, tied with Arm of the Sphinx by Josiah Bancroft. So these are books 1 and 2 of the Books of Babel series, and they were utterly delightful. And I'm cheating a little bit because I couldn't decide between either of these. They were very different, and I loved them both. I read them right back to back. I love the whole series, but this first half for me was where the magic really was. And the longer I spent with the plotting, and as it got towards the end, it kind of lost steam a little bit for me. But this book 1 was just entrancing. We're following this bumbling school teacher character who's very kind of filled with book knowledge, but extremely unworldly. And the arc that Thomas Senlin goes on, as you know, he's first arriving at this really crazy setting of the Tower of Babel in this really cool world that Bancroft created, and he's there with his young wife, and they're on their honeymoon. She gets lost really early on, and he's left on his own to try to navigate the lower area of the tower and try to find her. And this is one of the most dramatic and impactful one-book character arcs I can remember. And for me, discovering the lower levels of the tower with Senlin was just so intriguing. And that was the real magic of that first book. And then book 2, though, it kind of opens things up a little bit. There's more of a core cast and a little motley crew, and there's some lore drops, and we get to go further up the tower and discover more levels, and it just, the change, it felt very different from book 1, and the two of those together were just a perfect start to a series for me that, just loved both of those, and that whole series is quite special for me. At number 6 is This Inevitable Ruin by Matt Dinniman. That's book 7 of Dungeon Crawler Carl, the only book on this list I read twice. First with the print release, and then just a couple months later with the audiobook release by the inimitable Jeff Hayes, who's just tremendous. But I loved it in both formats, and this is Matt Dinniman just firing on all cylinders. He's introducing new cylinders in this book and firing those. I mean, it is insane how many different little plot lines and balls he's juggling and keeping in the air and bringing to a satisfying convergence and conclusion, and how they all intersect. I mean, we are involving every single side character, introducing new ones that are memorable, and opening up more of the meta plot involving stuff outside the dungeon. This is also the Faction Wars floor, where there's just a large-scale kind of World War I style battle sequence kind of thing going on, and I think Dinniman was tremendous with these new types of action sequences, and then some just classic crass humor where you think, like, there's just no way Dinniman just did that, but he did, and then juxtapose those against extremely tense, tragic moments, sometimes moment to moment, and it's just this really lively tone that works so well for me in Dinniman's hands, and so, man, I got emotional at different points here. I think it just leaves me in a place where I cannot wait to continue on with the next book coming up in 2026. So, man, I love this. I love how different it is from the previous books, and I think I'm going to be able to reread this one many, many times and still get so much out of it. I know it's very confusing. There's a lot of different factions, and it's okay to not really be able to distinguish a bunch of those. On reread, that was much easier, but on first read, you just go with the flow, and man, what an impactful read. And the way he brought in some other POVs here just had incredible emotional payoffs. So I want to be wary of what I'm saying for spoiler reasons, so I won't say too much more, but man, I loved This Inevitable Ruin. At number 5, we have The Long Walk by Stephen King, one of his earliest written novels as Richard Bachman, and I was not expecting too much from this, given how young he was when he wrote it, but I read this in 2 days, I think. Less than 2 days. Could not put it down, and it was so immersive and tense, and the premise is there's this dystopian kind of near future where every year a bunch of young, like late teenage, 20-something boys sign up for this long walk, and they all just set off on the road, and there's one survivor who's ever kind of walking and lasts the longest, and it is just so surprising how King distinguished all of these characters on the walk, and they felt really like teenage boys would, and the way that they interacted with each other, and I felt like I was right there walking beside all of them. And I love just how it wasn't just a combative kind of negative attitude that they took towards each other. They were often really trying to build each other up and support each other on the walk, and they were all in it together. And it had a lot of poignance because of that. And the way it ended was suspenseful and really interesting, because it's one of the few books I've ever read where the ending was kind of abstract in a way. Like it was left up for interpretation what happened at the very, very end. And I would think I wouldn't really love that, but I really, for this book, it worked perfectly. I think there's multiple interpretations you could have that would be valid. And I love that it's not clarified, and so it leaves a little mystery right at the end. And man, this was just an electrifying read. I guess with Dungeon Crawler Carl and this and Squid Game even on TV, I love the heightened intensity of kind of these kind of dystopian death games or situations that people are put in. Just raises the temperature and the emotional stakes so high for every moment. And wow, if you've not tried this early King, I'd say go for it. I would, if I didn't know, I would never have guessed it was one of his earliest books. And he, between 11/22/63 and this, and I think King could be a favorite author of mine, and I gotta go through a lot of his backlist, and I'm really pumped for that. At number 4, one of the longest fantasy books ever published, and this was To Green Angel Tower by Tad Williams, the third and final book of the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn trilogy. And man, I just had a blast with this. This was kind of the opposite of The Long Walk or Shadows Upon Time, where I just flew through it. Like this one, with Tad's writing, I just was taking my time with it and not rushing, and that worked for me so well with it. I was kind of rushing through book 1 to catch up in time for a buddy read chat, but when I slowed down with Stone of Farewell and To Green Angel Tower, that was when I just completely got lost in the magic of Tad's writing. And this book had so much in it. There were some side quests, little adventures that captivated me with some of the really unique world building and creatures that Williams was populating this world with. There's not that much action in this trilogy, but there's an intense battle sequence that kind of finishes up the first half. And man, Simon going from a kitchen boy to someone who's in the thick of real fighting, and it was written in such a visceral way that hit so hard. And then the tragic consequences of all that were just so hard hitting. There was a side character, I don't even want to mention the name of the side character, but he was one of the most ultra compelling side characters I can remember, that added a lot to this whole finale, and some lore history reveals, and the way it all came together towards the end just left me in a very satisfied place, but really wanting to go on, and I'm so pumped to continue into the Last King of Ostenard series soon. And so this was just everything I want out of epic fantasy, and beautiful writing that just felt rich and just kept me immersed. And man, I love, in the end, William's style, and which was, I was worried from book 1 that I wasn't going to get into it, but I did. It just took a little time, and then in those last couple books there, I just had a magical experience with. So yeah, wonderful time there. And if you haven't checked out Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn and think you would enjoy slower, more deliberately paced epic fantasy with rich prose, man, this would be a great choice. Number 3 is Memory by Lois McMaster Bujold. Now, this book, if you have read the series, you might have been thinking, wait, where was that on the honorable mentions list? Oh, it wasn't there, so it has to show up here, right? And it is a tremendously emotionally impactful mid-series book that kind of does for Miles Barkowskian a lot of what Changes does for Harry Dresden in the Dresden Files. This kind of mid-series book to shake up everything and just put the character in a place where they have to reevaluate everything that's going on in their life, and maybe they made some mistakes or are about to make some big mistakes, and they have to pick up the pieces and figure out how to move forward. And that's what we have here. And it's one of the unique things about really long-running series, that you can have a book like this that you just couldn't have with a short series or a standalone. And one of the reasons I love these huge, epic mega series, because it makes something like this possible. And man, Bujold, it just utterly amazed me. And took me to an emotional place. I didn't know that we could go from the first half of this series, and just leveraging all the side characters that she'd been populating the cast with leading up to this, and this, there was a side character here that took center stage and impacted the story on an emotional level that I don't think I've experienced with a side character before. But really, this was just a quiet, more introspective character journey for Miles, and also a bit of a mystery for a sci-fi adventure series. A lot of the most impactful books for me have been these more quiet ones, which take place landside, not much space involved, but the world building, the plotting, the long-term character arcs that she's been building for many books just all come to a head here, and this was tremendous. I already started a reread of the series, and really look forward to getting back to this point again, where I think it just takes off and becomes something ultra special from what I was really enjoying before. But man, this just took it to a new level. At number 2, I didn't say we weren't going to have repeat authors. I think the only rule I set for myself for this list was that I wasn't going to put on rereads. And so for new reads, whatever were my top 10 books were going on this list. And at number 2 was All the Seas of the World by Guy Gavriel Kay. So this is also part of that Renaissance Italy set of 3 books, and it is truly a follow-up to A Brightness Long Ago. I don't think this is clear enough for people, but it's a sequel to A Brightness Long Ago. There's direct character follow-ups. Some main characters that are in A Brightness Long Ago are featured again in All the Seas of the World. So this is a great follow-up to that, and I love Brightness Long Ago. That was one of my favorite books of the last couple of years, and so I was delighted to find out how much continuity there was. But there were, I guess, most of the main POVs here were new characters for All the Seas of the World, and I just connected to them on such a deep level. There's a kind of theme of lost souls, displacement, people being in exile, and finding, a home for themselves, away from home, and just with newfound family and forging new connections. And it was a beautiful theme that was really woven throughout all these different characters and storylines. And the main characters, Lenia Serrana and Rafael Benetton, they're really memorable characters at the heart of this, who have this deep friendship and work together on this trading ship in the Mediterranean. And we intersect with politics back in the Battiara, the version of Italy, and with some pirate cities and in North Africa. And it is a very tense, suspenseful political plot, and extremely emotional. Man, I just was in awe reading this, how much I was emotionally connecting to it all. And this book does not get a lot of hype, again, for Guy Gavriel Kay. I think these more recent books he wrote in late 2010s, 2020s are just utter masterpieces, and do not leave them out from your TBRs. From Brightness Long Ago, definitely read that before All the Seas of the World. But those 2 books, just so personally special for me. And then Children of Earth and Sky as well. It kind of follows in chronology a little bit after this. All 3 of these books, just some of my favorites ever, and I really look forward to returning to them time and time again. At number 1, my favorite book of the year was A Civil Campaign by Lois McMaster Bujold. So this is the book that comes just 2 after Memory. And I loved Memory, but this one just entertained me on another level. Memory was so tense and emotionally dark. This one was a bit lighter. There was a lot of levity mixed into the emotional drama. And this is also a quiet book. This is Bujold really riffing on the kind of Jane Austen style novels of manners and drawing rooms and big dinner party sequences. And this book just, it had me laughing hysterically in moments, and it drew tears from me in others. And it just went on the complete emotional gamut here. And once again, the type of book that you can only really have after a whole bunch of books leading up to it, and just paying off all of these things that have been building and building for thousands of pages. I was having so much fun with this book, and that's what I'm after. I want to have fun with my reads. I want to have all these deep emotional experiences, and this series, this book gave me all of that. And I'm so thankful for the Vakorskin saga, for Bujold, and I'm going to be diving into all of her fantasy works this year, which I'm super pumped about. But it was tough getting to the end of the Vorkosigan saga, and just being done with that series I'd spent so long with, and I had so many books to look forward to at points, and I just felt like it was never going to end. And after about 20 books, 16 novels and 4 novellas, it's all done. And man, coming down off that high is really hard. And but I kind of dealt with that by immediately going back and rereading Shards of Honor and Barrayar and Warrior's Apprentice, and I had a great time rereading those. And so I don't think I'm going to be saying goodbye to the Vorkosigans and co anytime soon. They'll live deeply inside my hearts, and but through rereads, I'll always have them to entertain me and to just provide all of these really deep meditations on life and relationships and our purpose, and also just having a fun, gritty time as well, and trying to establish a new generation and culture on Barrayar, a very traditional planet. And man, this series just has so many deep rewards. If you haven't done it yet, I'd just beg you to go try Shards of Honor and see if you can connect with the writing style. And that was an early written book, and not sure, go for a couple more, but Barrayar, the sequel right after Shards of Honor, man, so great. Then you get into the Miles books, you'll see kind of the main character you'll be dealing with for a lot more books, but the growth of this character. I was not in love totally with Miles as the protagonist. I'd been so in love with Cordelia from those first couple books, and then it took me a while to warm up to Miles as our primary POV, but the payoffs from Brothers in Arms, Mirror Dance, Memory, Komar, to a civil campaign and beyond, just unbelievable. So, man, this is the real, true highlight of this last year and a half of reading, was discovering Los Max Bujold and this series. Yeah, that was my #1 book of the year. Let me know in the comments what your favorite reads of the year were. Hope you enjoyed my top 10, and Happy New Year!